What's going on, everybody? We are here for Solution Sunday, which I think might actually switch over to Solution Saturday, depending on our schedule moving forward. We're integrating that podcast and everything we're doing, and it's one of those that we're trying to figure out the best release schedule for everything. So, either way, this wraps up our solution for our What If Wednesday. We'll see. This is my first time going live on YouTube, so it's kind of an interesting setup. I'm trying to figure all of that out. We'll rock with it. All right. So, there we go. Let me get that video. Perfect. So, what we talked about on Wednesday was what happens if you have a hostile termination and you want to make sure that your employees are taken care of, and you want to make sure that there's communication from the top to the bottom, as far as where the termination happens, all the way to where the individual leaves the building. I think that's super important to pay attention to, because if something happens on the 10th floor or 15th floor, it's going to take a while for it to trickle down to everybody that's on the lower levels. So you have to make sure you have great communication in place, or have a policy and procedure in place to escort the individual off of the campus or off of the building premises, so that you don't have to worry about something else happening, like property destruction or that individual harming somebody on the way to their vehicle. Another big important thing is, you never know what's going to happen outside of the building. You're still responsible for that person while they're there. You're responsible for everything that happens, right? So if they do something in the parking garage, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, right? Or you're going to be responsible for that. One of the recommendations I found that I really found interesting was using a certain platform that allows like an interweb. That might be the wrong way to describe it, but a software within your organization that allows you to notify the guards either through their through their individual cell phones or through whatever terminal they're on. So you don't have to worry about, finding a number, trying to call and wait for somebody. There's an immediate notification. I think that was a pretty interesting solution that came up. One of them I found is obviously trying to sell the software for that. But I think it's important to know that it is out there at least. The interesting thing that they notate is that without a software in place, they kind of trying to sell on that fear aspect, that without the software in place, the supervisor is going to search the property for guards, hoping to locate someone in a short time frame. That seems honestly kind of ignorant. I think that's one of those where you should already have that in place. It shouldn't be, oh, let me go search. It should be, I already have this person standing outside the door in the room with you. And if you don't have security present, you can always hire an outside individual. So a service that we offer is for hostile work environments and being present during the termination. So that way, if something does get out of hand, you can intervene. And there are several different avenues you can use to take that. It can either be your own contracted security. You can bring in an outside source like myself, but you can also bring in law enforcement. I know a lot of law enforcement organizations they're willing to come to your location and help with what they can, more as a moderator to make sure it doesn't get out of hand and to keep, I think, everybody calm in that situation. So that's an interesting, you can get your law enforcement officers out there. I know in Atlanta it might be a little bit more difficult because of the priority level. So it might need to be something that you schedule a few days in advance, where you request an officer on site, 3 days from now at this time. So definitely an option on that one. they have a couple other recommendations on this one site that I found. And again, it's really selling a solution as a platform that you need. Um, but I think what it boils down to is what your procedure is in place for terminations in general. Do you have, excuse me, do you have an HR individual in the room to make sure you're saying or not saying what you should or shouldn't? Having if it's a female, making sure there's another female in the room so there's no allegations of anything and you can maintain that. Having management obviously there to handle their end of things, and then having security in place. And then the security guard, their responsibility, whoever you bring in as security, if it's a police officer, whoever, I would clearly define for them what your expectation is. So don't just have them there, have them present, and let them stand by. Make sure you speak with them beforehand and you tell them, my expectation is if something happens, you intervene, you moderate if anybody gets worked up, and that's both sides. So if you're the one doing the termination, make sure you maintain a calm, cool, collected demeanor, but also for the individual being terminated, but also explain that you want them to escort the individual all the way off the property. And that means from the time they leave the office, all the way through the building, all the way out into the parking lot, the parking deck, wherever they may be, make sure they get in their car and actually leave the property. And as soon as that's completed, I would make sure to put out a notice to everybody through whatever system or platform you already have. Hey, John Smith has been terminated. Excuse me. He's no longer welcome on premises, and his access, whatever card access to this area or that area, non-public areas, has been revoked. That way, anybody in that front lobby area will be familiar with the situation. They'll know that they don't need to let him back in if he happens to leave property and come straight back on. So that's something that I've seen happen several times where you think you're good to go, and then the person circles back an hour later once they have steamed a little bit and want to talk more, if you will. But that's definitely something that you should be focused on. One other huge aspect that I think is important is thinking about the culture you've built within your organization prior to the termination. There was an incident that happened up in Ohio where a man was going to be terminated. He had been working at this location as a manufacturing warehouse. He'd been working there for 15, 16 years, somewhere around in there. And he got the feeling he was at the end of his tenure there. And the morning that the termination was going to take place, he'd been called to the office at lunchtime. And he went around the entire facility telling all of his coworkers that he was going to kill anybody that was involved in his termination. And he made it adamant. And what's interesting is everybody heard him say this. When police got involved later, everybody heard him make the threats, but not a single person reported it because they said that it was just him being angry. It was just him being himself, if you will, and they didn't see it being out of the ordinary. And that's a culture where you don't have a see something, say something, or you don't have individuals that understand the importance of a threat like that, because that could be pretty serious. With that scenario, what ended up happening is right before he went to the office, he went out to his car, pulled out a gun from his glove box that many people knew he kept there, put it in his waistband, went into the termination. They fired him. He then shot and killed all 4 people in that room. And then as he was leaving the property, he shot another coworker and killed him. Police responded he ended up barricading himself in the office. Other employees heard the commotion, called the police. Police showed up. He ends up shooting 4 SWAT officers that are moving toward the building in order to obviously take him into custody or to eliminate any further threats. And he ends up shooting 4 police officers. This guy was determined. He was determined to create a bad situation for a employer that he felt was wrong in their doing. He didn't feel like he needed to be terminated for it. And nobody took it serious. Nobody thought, oh man, he's threatening to shoot up the place. We should tell management. Or the culture within was not one of communication. And that's a huge piece that you need to look at when you're focusing on workplace safety. What's the culture of your organization? Do they understand the importance of reporting certain things? And do they understand the route to report it up the chain of command? Definitely something to take into consideration. If you have any questions about any of this, definitely reach out. I would love to know some feedback. If you've had any type of hostile termination situation at your place of work, definitely reach out to me and we'll be able to talk about it a little bit. I'll even use your scenario in one of these videos or in one of these podcast episodes if you're interested. And we can kind of work our way through it and how to keep that type of tragic situation from happening at your place of work. Other than that, thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to y'all later.